Okay, welcome back, everybody. I can see the last dregs of the coffee queue coming back. The amendment is now open for debate. Archdeacon of Llandaff.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome back, governing body members. It is good to debate these things, isn't it? I can feel the buzz in the room, and I know you've all been talking about the amendment. It's healthy for us as a governing body, so I welcome this debate. However, I cannot agree to James's amendment, though there is agreement that a longer term of office is desirable. I feel the amendment is too complicated administratively and could lead to organisational chaos. And as such, I think it will effectively become an opt-in, as most ministry area councils will look at that complexity and leave it at 1 year. So it effectively becomes a wrecking amendment. There is already, I believe, considerable permission within the motion as it is, and it is relatively simple and clear for everyone. Therefore, I oppose the amendment.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? Oh, a sea of people, right? Oh, my word. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Right. Okay, Leonie? Yeah.
I'm Hannah Leonie Oxenham, here as a lay rep for the Diocese of Monmouth elected. I just wanted to say that I welcome the spirit behind both of the initial motion and of the amended motion as well. Completely take on board what Rod was saying about the potential then for additional administration, but wondered actually if that would necessarily be the case or if it perhaps might provide more ability for people to be supported. So, for example, if we had a range of template standing orders that could be put together initially that people could choose from, might it create more flexibility across different mission and ministry areas to be able to work a system that works better for their specific context, rather than to have something that is more shaped across the Church in Wales as a whole. So for that reason, personally, I would support the amended motion.
Thank you. Archdeacon of Carmarthen.
Matthew Hill, elected to the Diocese of St David's. So I wish to speak in support of the original motion that Rod proposed and make an observation. As an Archdeacon, I've had an interesting experience of dealing with a LMA, a ministry area, which we've had to place under episcopal visitation. Part of the problem of that was that rather than trustees acting in the interests of the entire benefice, they used the LMAC meetings as a theatre in which to have conflict between churches within the benefice and to try and resolve conflict within the benefice. But the other thing is we've had to start the standing orders again, because it transpired that the standing orders they were using were not really, in certain places, in accordance with the diocesan constitution or necessarily the constitution of the Church in Wales. So having the original proposal, which locks very clear rules to follow into the Church in Wales constitution, I think is the more advisable path from my own experience than just leaving LMAs to just write standing orders sort of unsupervised. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn chi.
Thank you.
Philip Avery, elected Monmouth. I'm coming to just support the amended motion. Having spoken to lots of people across in different ministry areas, we are a varied bunch of people and how we operate. And I would lend my support to this amended motion because it would give each of us the flexibility to actually make our ministry areas work in a way that functions for us locally. Thank you.
Just for clarity, we are voting on an amendment to the motion. The motion has not yet been amended. Okay, so for clarity, Archdeacon of Gwent Valleys.
Thank you. Stella Bailey, nominated Archdeacon Monmouth. I'd like to speak against the amendment that James has put forward. We've just heard from Bishop John his reflection and feedback from the learning communities. And in amongst what he said was an important statement, which was the desire to to discover the points that draw us together, the unity across the divergence in the way in which each diocese functions with their MAs. If we were to pass this amendment, we're actually creating even more diversity, not seeking that unity that was the learning that came from the learning community. There's also a note in what James said, which was these standing orders are passed on to the Archdeacon. And every Archdeacon in the room, their hearts sank, because not only are we trying to ask the question of what is the constitution and diocesan policies that we're applying to an issue of conflict, suddenly we're having to navigate the nuances of numerous different versions of standing order application that can change with the whim of a new ministry area leader who decides to review the standing orders and pass them with a 51% majority vote. And I'm just envisaging the areas of conflict that can come from it. Please, governing body, don't pass this amendment. Let us seek the points of unity, not divergence. Let's keep the points of unity in the Constitution, not at individual decision-making on the ground. There's nothing in the original motion that cannot be worked through and applied through good leadership, good administration, and an Excel spreadsheet.
Archdeacon Meirionnydd.
Dwi am siarad yn y Gymraeg, Robert Townsend, Archdeacon Meirionnydd, Archdeacon wedi enwebu i Esgobaeth Bangor. Gai ddiolch am y ddau cynnig sydd gebron ac am y newid i'r cynnig. Dwi eisiau holi cwestiwn. Tas ni'n derbyn yr newid yma, ai hynny fysa tro cyntaf bod y geiriau reolau sefydlog yn ymddangos yn cyfansoddiad yr Eglwys yng Nghymru? Achos petai hynny yn wir, bysa rhaid esbonio yn y cyfansoddiad beth ydy rheoliadau sefydlog.
My learned colleague is currently doing a word search, I think. And we will get back to you. Archdeacon Mishner.
Monis Faras and David. There is a concept called natural church development that I'm sure most of you have studied and looked into. Natural church development, NCDs known in short, speaks about 8 qualities of a growing, living, dynamic church. And one of the first qualities is functional structures. Functional structures are essential for any growth to be happening and to be sustained. If it's not, if you don't have the functional structures, whatever growth that you are seeing and whatever development and moving forward you're having, it's always vulnerable for collapse. Give you an example. If I want to grow a good vine, I put structures around that vine for it to be supported. Otherwise, the branches will break. The same thing with passion fruit. If you want a passion fruit plant, it will both need good structures to support them. Now, one of the things that we can be diverse about as a church is the way we express ourselves in our worship, in our identity, in our outreach, to actually function locally. But to be part of a wider church, we do need a unified structure that is able to uphold the whole tree. Otherwise, the whole tree will suffer because you've got different functional structures in different places. So I'm speaking against the amendment, not because the amendment is wrong, it's just that I don't think it fits the purpose for which we are looking at of setting up the structures that Archdeacon Rod is trying to direct us towards setting.
Hannah Wilkinson.
Hannah Wilkinson, St David's. I'm speaking as an ordinary member of the congregation. If I try and take part in what my church is doing, then it's helpful to know what the structure is. If I then move 10 miles down the road and find that the structure is completely different, I'm going to get horribly confused. And if my niece or nephew lives 20 miles away and they've got yet another different structure, I'm going to get even more confused. Therefore, I'm speaking against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Henley.
Okay, Sue Henley, St David's Diocese. I'm an LMA chair in Aberystwyth. St David's Diocese, as part of its setting up of our ministry areas, produced a template, standing orders, for all of our LMAs. Within that, there are areas that can be changed to reflect the local circumstances, but there are set things that are in line with the Constitution of the Church in Wales that stand. What I find as chair of the LMA Council is that it's really helpful to have those standing orders there in writing to refer to. They're really helpful in inducting new members of the LMA Council, and they give clarity to our organisation. Now, as you've heard already, that doesn't necessarily go smoothly across the whole diocese, and we're still trying to implement that. I don't believe that by having LMAs write down the rules that they're operating by actually causes more confusion, causes more work. I believe it actually gives us boundaries to work with. Each of our LMAs at the moment has their own structure. They have their own organisation that they're working to. Not everybody on those councils knows what those rules are because they're not written down anywhere. They're not passed on from year to year. They're there somewhere in the collective knowledge of those councils, those congregations. I believe that by having template standing orders that are in line with the Constitution, but allow for some flexible interpretation locally to suit the needs of each ministry area, it will give better boundaries and it will actually support people on our LMA councils and give them the confidence to stand and to take part in those discussions. So I am in favour of this amendment.
Modesty forbids me to say who drafted the standing orders for St David's Diocese. Canon Wood.
I'm sure Mr Chinnery did a very good job helping you all. Richard Wood, elected cleric Bangor. I'm not going to repeat some of the things others have said. I'll just say one other different thing, speaking against the amendment. In this room is one person who has been a lay chair of a MAC where I've been the vicar, and one other who is a member of the MAC where, unfortunately, they have to tolerate me chairing it at the moment. At every MAC meeting I have ever been part of, I think I have said, you are members, you are not representatives. And here today, I'm still hearing we're talking about representatives of churches on MACs. We do not have representatives, we have members. This amendment seems to me to be working towards trying to fit around the way one particular ministry area works. Now, that's fine, we have some diversity in approach, mission areas, ministry areas, local ministry areas. There is diversity, we've allowed that, but this would let the cat out of the bag and take us far too far further. We have what we need to. MACs are able to co-opt. So if there's a ministry area or a mission area that wants to bring onto its MAC certain people because of the particular setup of their mission area or ministry area, they can do so by co-opting them. We don't need to change what's a good proposal, amend it in this way to be able to fit to those needs. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? No, in which case, James, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, for engaging with the amendments that I proposed. I appreciate it, both those in support and those against. Let me just respond to some of the concerns that were raised before we move on to vote on the amendment itself. Concern was raised that this would be too complex administratively, that it might create organisational chaos. That's not my feeling. My feeling is that as things stand, if we were to adopt the unamended motion A or motion B, there would still be a divergence of practice between ministry areas, and that would still need to be tracked. The use of standing orders and flexibility enables each ministry area to have that important conversation about what does good governance look like for us amongst themselves, and sometimes that conversation is as important as the outcome of the conversation, but sometimes it does need an impetus for that open and transparent conversation to be able to happen. It was raised that some ministry areas, mission areas are already writing their own standing orders, but in some cases those standing orders are ineffective or actually run contrary to the provisions in the Constitution. Well, I would argue that the accountability in the amendment that I've proposed actually resolves that. It stops ministry areas from being able to put together standing orders where perhaps they haven't got everything right in there because those copies are sent to the Archdeacon and the Registrar, who are able to look at them and able to come back and point out where there are contradictions, where there are issues. It doesn't take episcopal visitation or the Archdeacon coming and discovering to their dismay that something's wrong before that they're alerted to that problem. The question of too much divergence and variation from place to place, and that being confusing if a parishioner moves from one ministry area to another. Again, I would argue inherent in both motions A and B is that there will be divergence of practice. The question is whether that will be between two different options or more than that. So if that's your concern, then I might suggest that actually it would be a reason to vote against the unamended motions as well as my amendment. Then finally, perhaps the most important question was the one of people representing their own churches versus the entire MA. I completely understand that concern. As charitable trustees, it's important that we represent the interests of the entire charity, the entire ministry area, not just the individual church. However, an important aspect of the transition to ministry and mission areas in many places has been being able to assure local churches that their voice will be heard. And one of the key mechanisms for that to happen, I believe, in a number of places, has been being able to structure ministry area council membership in a way that ensures that there are representatives from every church. We perhaps need to think about the inherent risk in the opposite view without nuance, which is actually that we might end up with some churches in our ministry areas not having a voice or representation at ministry area level because they don't have a MAC member who's able to be a conduit of communication and not just a warrior for the best interests of their local church community. So that's how I respond to that, although I completely understand the concern. In his presidential address, the Archbishop spoke about the importance of listening to what's happening at ministry area level, trusting our clergy and people to be able to discern where God is calling us. And I would argue that this amendment enables us together to shape forms of governance with appropriate parameters and accountability, which will be effective and work on a local level. If you're thinking to yourself, well, if motion A or B passes, our ministry area would probably stick with the status quo as it is now, but we'd love to be able to do something different, then this amendment gives you the opportunity to be able to do that. Perhaps it's just one ministry area, perhaps it's just us in East Cardiff, in which case I'm very happy to concede the point. However, if there are others who feel that that flexibility within parameters and with accountability would be helpful, then I hope you'll join me and support the amendment that I proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will now vote on the amendment. This is by simple majority of the governing body. Members are asked to show their voting cards. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against? I think clearly that the amendment has fallen.
Could we go back to the original slides, please, ITD?
We're now back to the original motion as proposed by the Archdeacon of Llandaff. Canon Emlyn, do you want to speak? Because you were the last one at the podium before.
No, I've taken legal advice and I've decided not to.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on the original motion? No. Okay, in which case, Archdeacon Rod, you have the right of replying now on the original motion.
Chair, I have nothing further to say, really. I think it's been a really fruitful debate, and I look forward to seeing the results of the vote, yes, to commend it to you.
Thank you. Right, okay, again, this is by simple majority vote. All those in favour, please show cards. All those against? Any abstentions? I think the motion has clearly passed. I think given the permission to everybody to defer the RB. With the permission of the governing body, we are going to defer the next agenda item, the report of the representative body, and instead move to agenda 11, and I ask Mrs. Sue Rivers to take the chair.
Wel, prynawn da pawb. Yn bleser I fod yma eto, bod y sesiwn yn un fyr. So, thank you and good afternoon. This next session is going to be very short, and we are going to address agenda item number 11, which is Dr. Monica Attias to address the governing body. And I'm going to invite His Grace to introduce Dr. Monica.
Chair, thank you. Andrew Archbishop. It's an enormous pleasure for me to introduce our speaker to end today's session. By way of background, Monica is the coordinator of the Santa Egidio Humanitarian Corridors Programme for Afghanistan and Cyprus, as well as the Anti-Trafficking Project, which caters to victims of human trafficking. She's been a member of that community since 1978 and has volunteered in the field of research on migration and asylum since the year 2000. Dr. Attias has a long experience in ecumenical relationships as well, particularly with the Methodist and Anglican churches. She's a scholar in the contemporary ecumenical history of the Witness of the Faith, Vatican New Martyrs Commission of 2000, and since 2008 she's worked at the Italian National Institute of Statistics as a senior researcher in international relations and cooperation. She's a member of the working group also on displaced persons and hospitality to the stranger, part of the culture of encounter. The last time I met Monica in the Vatican was when she was greeted by a group of children whom she had brought from different parts of the world, they being displaced people. And one of the things that struck me then wasn't just the skill with which she had negotiated these pathways, but the love and the affection in which she was held by those children and by their parents. It was an extraordinary moment of human grace. Could I ask you please to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Attias.
Thank you very much for this very warm welcome, and I hope you will apologize my strong Italian accent. Anyway, the title of my presentation is Living the Gospel from the World Peripheries. So it's an honor for me to participate in this meeting in the framework of the Church of Wales governing body, and to bring the testimony of the community of Sant'Egidio. Not my personal testimony, but the testimony of a community. And I sincerely thank Archbishop Andrew, who is a dear friend, though our friendship is relatively recent, because we met 2 years ago. Not even, 3 years ago, sorry. But we have many other friends in the Church of Wales, Bishop Gregory, and occasionally others of you. So, in this time marked by wars, division, widespread isolation, and absence of dialogue, our gathering here today is a true witness of unity, and it shows how we can be an instrument for unity for all peoples. The community of Sant'Egidio was founded in 1968 in a time of upheaval and hope by a group of lay students who chose to live the gospel together in community rather than individually as heroes or saints, which we are not. We are very, very ordinary people. They chose daily common prayer as their most important appointment in the day, in the evening. They chose to view the world not from a privileged standpoint, but from the perspective of the people living at the periphery of the world. And we chose to foster dialogue among conflicting parties. So, in the end, we chose to have the poor not as beneficiaries of our social services, but as friends. And I would say that the key word for Sant'Egidio is friendship. Friendship with the poor, friendship with anyone who is like us or different. So, today, Sant'Egidio members, from the beginning, beside their profession or job, I'm a researcher, Emanuela and Luisa, who are at the back, they belong to the London community. One is a data analyst, we were talking before, the other is a researcher. So we are normal people who have their life, their paid job, yet we try to make room in our life for those who are underprivileged. And I think that this fact of not being paid by the church, but to choose to serve, has been a turning point in our lives. And it saved us from the ideological drift of these last decades. So we are joyful to be Christian, and we are proud of being a community of lay people, lay-led community. This doesn't mean that priests are not part of the community, but we are very proud that we were born from the laity. So we live in our houses like anyone else, and this is very important because maybe the word community can you think about a residential community where we live all together. No. In fact, we are 70,000 people in many countries of the world, in all the continents except Oceania. So you can imagine it's impossible to live together. And we have always felt that the service to the poor and prayer are just one thing, that faith must be rooted in history. Since the beginning of Sant'Egidio in the shanty town of the big European cities, in Rome, Paris, and so on, up to nowadays in the loneliness of our cities, we follow the example of the Lutheran theologian Karl Barth, who was saying the gospel in one hand and the newspaper in the other hand. So there is an appointment, a date of the church with history that we cannot escape. As Pope Francis, whom we remember with sorrow, as a pastor who has given his life to make the world hope again, as Pope Francis described, Sant'Egidio is the community of the 3 P, prayer, peace, and the poor. A perfect synthesis of what we want to live. And it's very nice that he said the same thing to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, when he went to visit the Pope. He said, continue with the 3 P, prayer, peace, and the poor. So the community are united in this effort to live the 3 P. And this means that our approach to history has not to be only managerial, would you say? Managerial. But it's the deep sympathy and humanity for the people of our times. People who are a bit in a difficult position today. Jesus says the poor will always be with you. So we are called to stop alongside the half-dead men of our time, to be companions on the journey with the poor, seeking justice for them and assisting them with their needs. And I think about three major challenges in our Western societies: the migrants and refugees. I'm not sure if Wales is very much touched by the reality of migration. I'm not sure. I didn't study enough. But certainly Europe is. The homeless who lose their dignity and they live at the borders of our society, and of course the elderly, increasingly numerous because of the child rate decrease, often forgotten and isolated, awaiting for a friendly friendship from our youth. So homelessness, I read in preparing this speech, is a growing problem in Wales. In 23 and 24, there are 13,500 households in Wales are assessed as homeless. So with an increase of 8%, which is, makes us reflect. And homelessness is associated with mental health. And mental health is associated with loneliness, surely. I was very struck that in the UK, you have a ministry for loneliness. I don't know if it's still working or not, but it's certainly meaningful of the reality of our Western countries. And poverty is the people who risk to live in persistent poverty are 12%. And these figures rise to 16% when we speak about children, who are our future. So we can imagine that our future will be marked by an increasing poverty of children who will become poor adults. So Archbishop Andrew this morning said something that struck me. Compassion is in the DNA of Christians, and it's true. It's really true. But I would like to add something else, that there is a spiritual foundation, a gospel foundation to the relationship with the poor, what we might call the sacrament of the poor, as we read in Matthew 25. I am the poor. So it's not an option to serve the poor, to meet the poor. It's in the Christian DNA itself. Prayer and liturgy draw our attention, care, and passion directly to the poor. So they are always close to us in London, in Wales, in Rome, and I would like to quote an example. Our community in London just celebrated their 10th year of what they call Our Cup of Tea. Our cup of tea is a big dinner, actually not only a cup of tea, but a wonderful meal offered monthly to the poor. But this is just a beginning of a relationship that is not just once a month. We become friends with them. They are our cup of tea in a world that is not really on the same line. So, not professional assistance, but friendship. So, these statistics that I quoted before tells us how the church can address the problem of loneliness and poverty. I personally think that the creation of communities of young people who serve the poor and pray together, not distinguishing the charitable organization from the prayer group, but people who link their prayer life to the service of the poor, can be a way for our young people, and not only for the young people, but also for the people who are far from the church, to rediscover the gospel, not the church. Let's start from the gospel. As the Archbishop was saying, to become more grounded and more creative. And I stress the word creative because we have to imagine something that it's not visible yet, with a lot of hope. So with the ongoing wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan, and beyond, we face challenges unseen since World War II. But we have the temptation to look inward, to look inside the church, and not to open our eyes to the world beyond our borders. But peace is a Christian task, and this is the third pillar that Pope Francis was mentioning. So, you remember in 1986, for the first time, John Paul II called this big meeting in Assisi. In a time of great optimism, it was a time of great optimism. 3 years later, the Berlin Wall collapsed, and the Iron Curtain, as Churchill defined it, was broken. So a time of great expectation. And peace lasted for a few decades. But now, after 4 years, from 1986, the enthusiasm for dialogue has waned. I don't know if Bishop Gregory, who has been a long time in this ministry of ecumenism and international, agree, but the passion for ecumenism, the passion of encounter, has decreased. So we see a resurgence of war as a mean to resolve the conflicts. Think about the UN. UN are capable to tackle the wars? No. Unfortunately, is economy that rules today. And the great ideals have faded. So Still, we remain convinced that interreligious encounter must continue. So from 1986 up to now, every single year, we organize an international encounter of prayer for peace with all the religions. And this was what Archbishop Andrew was mentioning, his participation in Paris last year. And he could touch with his hands how these meetings are not just for theologians. We go down in the streets. We had a wonderful prayer in front of Notre Dame with many thousand people, many students who came to listen to the conferences and ask questions to the leaders. What are you doing for peace? So, and I cannot forget how from these peace initiatives, who might seem naive in our world, many concrete actions for peace were taken. Think about the peace in Mozambique that was signed under the auspices of Sant'Egidio in 1992. So when I hear about skepticism, about the effectiveness, let's say, of dialogue, I ask, yes, maybe, but what would the world be like without this, without prayer, without fraternity, without dialogue? Think about the joint declaration in 2019 of human fraternity between the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University and Pope Francis. Who could imagine this in 2001? The clash of civilization. So, now I would like to speak a little bit, not long, because I presume that you are all tired. And maybe there is a time for questions after. That we are shifting from a world of the word we, us, to a world, the present society, that stresses the word I, me, always me. I am at the center of the world. So, I don't know if you have heard about the Russian theologian Pavel Florensky. He understood that there are times that he called the rapids of history, when the river has currents, strong currents. And we live in this rapid acceleration. This morning we heard about IA. This is very rapid. It's something that we were not confronting before. But in such times, Christians have to keep the inspiration that the word of God is a lamp for our steps. Psalm 119. Whereas the rest of the society says to our people, save yourself, don't think about the others. Come down from the cross, save yourself. So self-centeredness, whether personal, national, or religious, is at the root of every conflict. And the late Archbishop Anastasios of Albania, an Orthodox friend who was a great theologian, said very sharply, the opposite of peace is not war. The opposite of peace is selfishness. And I think this is profoundly true. So war, even though we don't realize because we will feel safe in our little cozy world, reaches our society. So no country is an island. Nationalism, populism, loneliness, and fear dominate also in our society. Think about the elections in Europe. It's a nightmare what is going to happen. So we are witnessing to the triumph of emotion over reason. People don't reason anymore. They react with anxiety, fear, emotions. So the people of today are disoriented, taken between globalization, diversity, and our little identity. Identity is so much important. and I heard how much important it is for Wales. I'm discovering the Welsh society. I'm fascinated. But we are attracted, we are tempted by a little safe local life when we don't see the bigger picture. We become like sleepwalkers, would you say that? So people who live without really understanding what's going on, or without wanting to see what's going on around them. Think about the perception of migrants and refugees in our society. So really dominated by fear and not by rationality. So Europe becomes a fortress. I read that at least 391 people died crossing between UK and France between 1999 and 2024. A tragedy. And these are women, children, people in seek of refuge, not only migrants. And the Mediterranean. We have figures that are unbelievable. So that's why Sant'Egidio, together with the Protestant Federation in Italy, has created a program, an ecumenical program, to rescue people in the countries where they are, avoiding the deaths in the sea. So I was just recently in Pakistan to prepare a trip for 200 Afghan refugees who are waiting to go to Europe. And then the Syrians and many other, the Sudanese, the Somali, who reached almost 88,000 people reached Europe through this program, which is a self-financed program. So, having said this, what is the future? As Pope Francis put it, we have to perform a revolution of tenderness. So this is what is expected from Christians, to sow peace around us at local level, at international level. We are called in our parishes, in our churches and dioceses, to be tailors, repairing the torn fabric of our society. You know, the Jews call this tikkun olam, which means the believers are there to heal a fractured world. So our society is inhospitable, but it needs the humanity of the gospel. And change begins with us being close to the marginalized. Hope can prevail because Jesus walks in the streets with us. Persistent prayer can move the mountains, and history, hopefully, ultimately, is full of surprises. So there's still hope. I conclude with a quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, a brilliant observer of our contemporary society. In his book, Morality, Sachs writes about a cultural climate change. From we to I don't know if it's right, from we to I or from us to me. Anyway, you understand what I mean. This is not moralism, saying, oh, we are all selfish. It is stark reality. If we see the society today, it's a society of I, one beside the other. So cultural climate change is different from environmental change, which is absolutely important, but it's a derivation of this. Culture is more local. Let's start from local to make a difference. All we need is to change ourselves first. And this is the wisdom of Sant'Egidio. Sant'Egidio would not be Sant'Egidio if it was not a process of everyone to change themselves. Give, say Jonathan Sachs, volunteer, listen, be generous. This is already a big program. Doing any of these things makes an immediate difference, and we don't have to wait for the world to change in order to change our lives. Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe you have to go on with the program now.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you so much for such a reflective, inspirational and profound address, which hits our hearts so deeply. Thank you so much. I can now open the floor for those members of governing body who wish to ask a question of Dr. Attias or to make a comment.
And there are also Emanuela and Luisa from the London community for any one of you who in the future would like to make contact. We will give you our address in London.
Thank you. Please come to the front.
Andrew Lightbound, elected cleric, Monmouth Diocese, Your Grace, thank you so much for what you had to say. In Newport, where I serve, we have the highest levels of homelessness in the country by a very significant difference on any ratio analysis. We currently have 1,359 homeless households, 500 homeless children, 38 rough sleepers, 198 people trapped in the sex trade. Then we have our asylum seekers, refugees, and others that just can't be brought into any statistical analysis, because the counting is only as good as the data you can collect. So it is by definition, I think, a significant underestimate. It's a disgrace. It's a theological disgrace, it's a spiritual disgrace, and it's a challenge to the churches. We're very lucky in Newport, fortunate to have the backing of the Royal Foundation to try and do something about it. We have wonderful churches working to make this better. We've got some funding for a Royal Foundation project to try and look at upstream solutions to stop families and young people, especially tripping into homelessness. We've also got discrimination and hate and evil on our streets. We've got exploitation through drugs. We've got the homeless in our shop windows being treated in a way that no human being should ever, ever, ever be treated. And it's a privilege to serve in that context. I believe it's a calling to serve in that context. And I think the challenge is always to befriend in that context. These people very frequently have a deficit of friendship, a deficit of love, and that's often been systemic, it's often been lifelong. And it's getting worse. Go into any primary school, and I would hesitate to suggest how much of the day is given to tackling social problems as opposed to running lessons. Archbishop Andrew said we have to be grounded. Well, that's our grounded reality in Newport. We've spoken about ecumenism. The Church in Wales cannot possibly do anything by itself. It just cannot. Ecumenism must mean befriending others of goodwill and searching for the goodwill of the whole, I believe. So, I want to thank you for what you said. Thank you for reminding us that we're a church that must go to the margins, reminding us that Jesus calls us to friendship. Jesus does not call us to patronize or judge how others arrived in the situation they have arrived in. Our faith demands us to stand in solidarity using whatever resources we have to bear, and to take risks, and to get some muck under our fingernails, some divine muck, to do what I like to call the dirty work of holiness. And I just believe that by doing all of this, we can be pastorally sensitive, and we can be a prophetic witness and challenge to a world that sometimes seems to be going bonkers, to my mind. We have to risk being a fragile church. We have to risk being laughed at by others for being people who may be naive, as you put it. Well, I'd prefer for us to be naive fools for Christ than to be erudite people pumping out nothing other than hot air. I would love to find ways to prayerfully work with organisations and communities such as yours, because I have this old-fashioned view that prayer does make a difference, and that if we're rooted in prayer, we might well be rooted from prayer to do something, to make a difference. I also feel in a city like mine there has to be an interfaith response, because we have a large and significant interfaith population. It is a complex problem, but perhaps we need to make it less complex by committing to prayer, to committing to friendship, to committing to getting some muck under our fingernails, and allowing ourselves to be changed by the people we encounter as you so demonstrably have. So thank you.
Well, grazie mille, Monica. Io sono ispirato con la discorso. Grazie. I mean, it was just wonderful to hear you and to be with you. My experience personally, I'm Dominic Cordell, by the way, St. Asaph. From my experience, the real transforming stuff happens one-to-one when you look someone in the eye and you stop seeing the poor as a problem to be solved, but a reality. I wonder when you come to respond to these, whether you could tell us what you would want the church to do differently, how you would like us to change to place peace and the poor and prayer at our heart. But grazie.
I'm not sure we have time. Yes, we have one more. Yes, we have plenty of time.
Apologies, third time already. Richard Wood, elected Bangor. Dr. Monica, thank you so much. You spoke powerfully throughout, but something at the very beginning grabbed me, and I think it grabbed a number of us, about the role of friendship. And you also spoke of compassion. And I remember that I've, in my head, made a journey from how we so often understand compassion as feeling sorry for, to what it really means, which is to suffer along with someone, to join someone in their suffering. And I think friendship is key to that. But I know for myself, a number of times I have failed to make that friendship journey. And I doubt I'm alone in that. And I expect as a community of the church in Wales, there are some shining lights amongst us of people who do. But it's something we find difficult as well. Is there anything that you've witnessed, experienced, seen in others in what you've done that can help us make that journey of friendship from not just feeling sorry for people to joining them in their suffering? Thank you.
Thank you.
Briefly, I will try to respond to both remarks. What to do? For me, it is important that whatever step we take it as a group, as a community. I remember the first time when I went to the outskirts of Rome, and the outskirts of Rome were really third world city at the time, in the late 60s, in the 70s, sorry, I'm not that old. I went to see a school, a tutoring project for underprivileged children, and one of the children broke my glasses, and I said to myself, I will never go again. But then, the fact that we are going together as a group, as a community, gave me the strength to continue, because alone we are nothing, nothing. There are very few heroes. And so it's a proposal for ordinary people, not for heroes. Although we try to make a commitment. We have no vows, no promises, but we are consistent. I mean, when you meet poor people, they wait for you. You cannot just consider that an experience and then bye-bye. So it's a commitment. But I think that it gives a lot of joy, as you know. And we can consider ourselves a joyful community in the spirit of Francis of Assisi. Not to take ourselves too seriously, not too seriously. This is a secret. To accept to be ordinary people, and prayer can help us. Every evening when we sit in front of God, we are aware that we have not changed the world, but we ask the Lord to do what we cannot do. So I have no advice. I'm sure there are plenty of experiences with the poor in your wonderful land of Wales. But certainly what I would say is don't hand over to professionals charity. Let's start ourselves, even if we do things not exactly properly, it doesn't matter. Because in Italy, as well in France, as well in the UK, I know many experiences in the church in the UK who started with a very strong sense of the poor, and then they handed over to professionals because they are better. Maybe these professional people are not Christian, so they give another approach to this work to the poor. So this morning we will say, be more professional on one side, because we have to study, we have to learn, we have to be always better. When we speak about statistics, statistics are very important to understand our society and so on. But at the same time, I would say, if this proposal must be for everyone, let's be less professional. Let's offer this opportunity to many young people in our churches, in our parishes, wherever we have, and also outside the church. I would say that in the London community, the majority of the people don't come from parish. They come from very secularized environment, and they discover Jesus for the first time through the relationship with the poor. This is the best way in today's society in which people don't know even the Our Father. I'm at least in Italy. I don't know about England. So let's bring them to the poor, and they will rediscover the true essence of Jesus. So that's the only humble remark that I can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Attias. I'm just going to give the floor to His Grace the Archbishop.
Colleagues, tomorrow I will need to say some farewells on our behalf to a number of people, but there are some who won't be with us tomorrow, whose contribution to the life of Wales and to the churches in Wales has been significant. And one of them is standing at the very back of this hall, Mr. Gethin Rhys. In fact, this evening at midnight, I think, he will cease to be the policy officer for Cytun, a role that he's held for 10 years. It's a mark of his commitment that he's choosing to be with us in the governing body of the Church in Wales on his last day. Gethin, I'm so grateful to you for what you've done in several respects. Your extraordinary capacity for detail has meant that we have been so very well served, and that was never more evident than when we needed to negotiate with the Welsh Government the rules and regulations around our gathering, particularly in the COVID period. Your scoping of that work helped us to be safe and to keep us on course. But you've also negotiated so well on behalf of all of the churches with the Welsh Government and have been a constant presence and interface between us and them. You've been studious and committed, and we've benefited so greatly from your work. We are profoundly grateful to you for all that you've done for us. And can we, governing body, show our thanks for God's work?
Thank you so much. That is the end of the business section of the governing body for today. We are going to convene at St Paul's Church, Craigydon, where the Archbishop has invited Miss Moira Randall to lead the governing body in evening prayer. And the Venerable Dr. Hayley Matthews will preach. After evening prayer, dinner will be taken at the Imperial Hotel at 7:15. And the business of the governing body will resume at 9:15 tomorrow, here, with prayers and Bible study led by the Venerable Rod Green. We will then, following that, address agenda item 10, which is the report of the governing body, of the representative body. So have a good evening. All the best.